The stars in the vast expanse of space burned brightly, like millions of eyes watching as two mighty fleets collided. The hum of engines and the crackle of energy blasts filled the dark void, but the true battle was yet to begin. Humanity's struggle against the Korthian Empire had reached its breaking point. For years, the Korthians had dominated the galaxy with their superior technology, AI-driven war machines, and cloaking devices that made them almost invisible to human sensors. They had no equal, or so they thought. Captain Darius Kane, a battle-hardened war hero of the United Earth Federation, was leading the charge. His ship, the Valor's Wrath, was one of the few human vessels capable of going toe-to-toe with the Korthian behemoths. As the battle raged on, Darius watched as his crew worked tirelessly, maneuvering the ship and firing back at the alien invaders. His face was set in determination, but in the back of his mind, there was a burning question. How long could humanity keep fighting? Suddenly, the Korthian fleet cloaked, disappearing from sight, and Darius's ship was left vulnerable. He knew that in the blink of an eye, they could be ambushed. And they were. A series of devastating energy blasts rocked the Valor's Wrath, sending shockwaves through the ship. The lights flickered and alarms blared. But Darius didn't panic. He wasn't a stranger to war. As the crew scrambled to regain control, he barked orders, trying to keep his ship intact. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, an alien ship decloaked just above them. But this was no ordinary warship. It was a royal vessel, sleek and deadly, with shields that could withstand any attack. And from the ship emerged a figure. She was unlike anything Darius had seen before. The Korthian princess, Lysara, stood in the doorway of her ship's command center, her eyes glowing with contempt as she looked down at the humans below. She was tall, regal, and wore the unmistakable armor of the royal family. Her skin shimmered like polished obsidian, a stark contrast to her icy blue eyes. She was beautiful but deadly, and every movement of hers exuded the arrogance of someone who had never lost a battle. Darius knew who she was. Lysara, the daughter of the Korthian emperor, was notorious for her hatred of humans. She had long seen them as inferior, a race unworthy of existence. Her presence on the battlefield was an affront to everything humanity had fought for. And now here she was, captured by the very people she had despised. As the Valor's Wrath finally regained its bearings, the crew watched in awe as the royal princess was brought aboard their ship. Darius stood at the front of the crew, his eyes locked onto hers, challenging, unyielding. There was no fear in his heart, but curiosity. What did this princess think of humans now? He knew she had been taught that they were nothing more than pests, a species incapable of rising above their primitive nature. Lysara was placed in a high-security cell, her eyes burning with fury as she glared at Darius. Her anger was palpable, and every word she spat was laced with venom. "You dare capture me, human," she sneered. "Do you not know who I am? The Korthian Empire will see your people burned for this. You will all pay for your insolence." Darius didn't respond. He simply motioned for the guards to leave, knowing it was pointless to argue with someone so consumed by hate. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this princess was not like the others he had encountered. There was something in her eyes, something more than just anger. Over the next few days, Darius made his rounds, checking in on the prisoners. But Lysara remained a mystery. She was confined to her quarters, constantly defying every order. She refused to eat their food, called them names, and threw insults at every soldier who passed by her cell. Her hatred for humanity seemed endless, but Darius knew there was more to her than just anger. He had seen it in her eyes, the flicker of uncertainty, the signs of someone questioning everything they had ever known. One evening, as Darius walked past her cell, Lysara caught his attention. She wasn't throwing insults like usual. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the stars, her expression unreadable. For the first time, she didn't seem like an enemy. She seemed lost. "Why do you hate us so much?" Darius asked, his voice low but firm. Lysara turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "You are beneath us," she spat. "Your kind is nothing but a blemish on the galaxy. My father was right to see you as a threat, and now you will pay the price for your existence." Darius took a step forward, but he didn't push further. He could feel the weight of her words, the centuries of hatred that had been instilled in her from birth. But he also sensed a crack in her armor. Maybe there was more to this princess than the stories told. Before he left, he spoke one final word. "We'll see, princess. We'll see." As Darius walked away, he couldn't help but wonder what it would take to make Lysera see the truth. Humanity wasn't weak. It was resilient. And if she could learn that, then maybe, just maybe, there could be more to their story than hatred. Maybe it was the start of something greater, something unexpected, something that might change the course of the war. The days following Lysera's capture were filled with tension. Captain Darius Kane couldn't shake the feeling that keeping the Corthian princess on his ship was a dangerous decision. Though he had ordered her to be confined to her quarters, he often found himself glancing at her cell, wondering what she was thinking. What was behind that icy gaze of hers? Her hatred for humans seemed unshakable, but Darius knew there was more to her than just anger. He had seen it in her eyes. Doubt, confusion. Yet he couldn't afford to get too close. The war with the Corthian Empire was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The Corthian fleet had launched a massive counteroffensive, and Earth was on the brink of collapse. With every passing day, the war seemed to intensify, and the human resistance was losing ground. The Corthians were relentless, their advanced eye-controlled ships cutting through the human fleet like a hot knife through butter. Darius knew the human forces were outmatched, and he feared it was only a matter of time before Earth fell. But one thing was clear. If they were to have any chance at survival, they needed to understand the enemy. That's where Lysera came in. As a member of the royal family, she had knowledge of the Corthian Empire that no one else had. Darius knew that despite her hatred for him and his people, she could be the key to turning the tide of the war. One evening, Darius decided to confront her. He had grown tired of the silent tension between them. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. He approached her cell, where Lysera was sitting in the corner, her back turned to him. "Princess," he said, his voice firm but controlled. "You're the only one who knows how the Corthians operate. Help us, and I'll make sure you're treated with respect. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to keep you locked up for the rest of the war." Lysera didn't even turn to face him. She remained silent for a long moment, her fingers idly tracing the bars of her cell. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold as ice. "Respect. You speak of respect after capturing me, imprisoning me like an animal. There is no respect between us, human, only hatred." Darius took a step forward, undeterred. "You may hate me, but I'm offering you a chance to save your people. The Corthian Empire is losing this war, just like we are. The only difference is, you have a chance to help end it. But you need to help us understand how your fleet operates, how your eye works. Without that knowledge, we don't stand a chance." Lysera turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "You are beneath us," she spat. "Your kind is nothing but a blemish on the galaxy. My father was right to see you as a threat, and now you will pay the price for your existence." Darius took a step forward, but he didn't push further. He could feel the weight of her words, the centuries of hatred that had been instilled in her from birth. But he also sensed a crack in her armor. Maybe there was more to this princess than the stories told. Before he left, he spoke one final word. "We'll see, princess. We'll see." As Darius walked away, he couldn't help but wonder what it would take to make Lysera see the truth. Humanity wasn't weak. It was resilient. And if she could learn that, then maybe, just maybe, there could be more to their story than hatred. Maybe it was the start of something greater, something unexpected, something that might change the course of the war. The days following Lysera's capture were filled with tension. Captain Darius Kane couldn't shake the feeling that keeping the Corthian princess on his ship was a dangerous decision. Though he had ordered her to be confined to her quarters, he often found himself glancing at her cell, wondering what she was thinking. What was behind that icy gaze of hers? Her hatred for humans seemed unshakable, but Darius knew there was more to her than just anger. He had seen it in her eyes. Doubt, confusion. Yet he couldn't afford to get too close. The war with the Korthian Empire was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The Korthian fleet had launched a massive counteroffensive, and Earth was on the brink of collapse. With every passing day, the war seemed to intensify, and the human resistance was losing ground. The Korthians were relentless, their advanced eye-controlled ships cutting through the human fleet like a hot knife through butter. Darius knew the human forces were outmatched, and he feared it was only a matter of time before Earth fell. But one thing was clear. If they were to have any chance at survival, they needed to understand the enemy. That's where Lysera came in. As a member of the royal family, she had knowledge of the Korthian Empire that no one else had. Darius knew that despite her hatred for him and his people, she could be the key to turning the tide of the war. One evening, Darius decided to confront her. He had grown tired of the silent tension between them. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. He approached her cell, where Lysera was sitting in the corner, her back turned to him. "Princess," he said, his voice firm but controlled. "You're the only one who knows how the Korthians operate. Help us, and I'll make sure you're treated with respect. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to keep you locked up for the rest of the war." Lysera didn't even turn to face him. She remained silent for a long moment, her fingers idly tracing the bars of her cell. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold as ice. "Respect. You speak of respect after capturing me, imprisoning me like an animal. There is no respect between us, human, only hatred." Darius took a step forward, undeterred. "You may hate me, but I'm offering you a chance to save your people. The Korthian Empire is losing this war, just like we are. The only difference is you have a chance to help end it. But you need to help us understand how your fleet operates, how your eye works. Without that knowledge, we don't stand a chance." Lysera finally turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "And why should I help you?" "So that you can destroy my people, my empire." Darius met her gaze, unwavering. "Because your people are going to lose anyway. And when that happens, you'll be left with nothing. Not even your empire." For a long moment, Lysera said nothing. The anger in her eyes was still there, but there was something else too. A flicker of uncertainty, like she was weighing her options. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "Fine. I will help you. But know this, human. I will never side with you. I am not your ally." Darius nodded. "I don't expect you to. But we're running out of time. The Korthians won't stop until they've destroyed everything." As they began to discuss the details of the Korthian fleet and their AI systems, Darius couldn't help but notice the way Lysera's expression shifted. She was no longer the proud, defiant princess he had first encountered. She was someone else now, someone torn between duty to her people and the realization that her empire's way of life was built on lies. The conversation was long and tense, but eventually they came to an agreement. Lysera would provide the human forces with critical information about the Korthian fleet's vulnerabilities. In return, Darius promised to ensure that she would not be harmed when the war ended. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The very next day, Darius set a plan into motion, using the information Lysera had provided. The human fleet made a daring assault on a Korthian stronghold, attempting to disable their cloaking devices and expose their true numbers. The battle was intense, and Darius's ship was in the thick of it. As they approached the enemy, cloaked Korthian ships began to decloak, opening fire with devastating force. The human fleet, despite being outnumbered, fought back fiercely, using every trick they had learned from Lysera's intel. It was a chaotic, violent battle, with explosions lighting up the blackness of space. Darius's ship, Valor's Wrath, weaved through enemy fire, dodging blasts and retaliating with its own weapons. But despite their best efforts, the Corthians were still far superior. Darius's ship took a hit, and the lights flickered. The crew scrambled to keep the ship intact, but it was clear they were losing. "Captain, shields at 30%, his communications officer shouted. "We can't take another hit like that." Darius clenched his fists, his mind racing. He knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The Corthian fleet was too powerful. But just as it seemed like all hope was lost, a new element appeared on the battlefield. The Corthian ships began to malfunction. Their AI systems, once perfect, started to glitch. It was chaos on the Corthian side, and the human fleet seized the opportunity. "Lysera," Darius muttered to himself, realizing what had happened. She had delivered the information they needed to disable the Corthian AI. With their AI in disarray, the Corthian fleet was no longer invincible. The human forces pushed forward, launching a counterattack that forced the Corthian ships to retreat. As the battle subsided and the human fleet emerged victorious, Darius felt a sense of relief, but it was bittersweet. The war was far from over. The Corthians would not give up so easily. And Lysera, she had helped them win this battle, but what did it mean for her? Was she truly ready to break away from her people? Darius couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain: their uneasy alliance had just begun. The days after the battle were filled with uncertainty. The human forces had won a crucial victory, but the cost had been high. The Corthian fleet had retreated, but Darius knew it was only a temporary setback. The war was far from over, and the Corthians were not the type to stay down for long. But for now, the human fleet had a moment of respite, a brief lull in the storm. The victory had also done something else. It had changed the relationship between Darius and Lysera. Lysera had kept her promise. She had given them the information they needed to disable the Corthian AI, and it had made a huge difference in the outcome of the battle. But Darius knew that trust was fragile. He couldn't forget that she was still an enemy, a member of the royal family who had once looked down on humanity as inferior. She might have helped them win this battle, but she was still Corthian, and the Corthian Empire was still the enemy. As Darius walked the corridors of his ship, he couldn't shake the image of Lysera. He had seen her in a different light during the battle. Gone was the arrogant princess who had once looked at him with disdain. In her place was a woman who had helped save countless human lives. And yet Darius couldn't let his guard down. He had seen too much of war to believe that anyone, especially someone from the Corthian royal family, could be trusted completely. Still, he couldn't deny the truth. Lysera had changed. She had gone from a captive princess full of hate to an unlikely ally, someone who had seen the flaws in her empire's way of thinking. But what did that mean for the future? Was she truly on their side, or was this just a temporary alliance of convenience? Darius found himself thinking about these questions constantly. The war was raging on, and there was no time for doubts or hesitation. The Corthians were regrouping, and the human fleet needed to prepare for the next wave of attacks. But Darius couldn't shake the feeling that Lysera might have more to offer than just intel. He had a gut feeling that her true intentions were still hidden beneath layers of loyalty to her people. One evening, Darius found himself standing before Lysera's cell once again. This time, he wasn't there to threaten her or demand information. He was there to talk, to understand where she stood. He had seen her fight alongside them, but he still wasn't sure if he could trust her. It was a dangerous game, but it was one they were both playing. Lysera was sitting by the window, looking out into the dark void of space. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were distant, lost in thought. She hadn't changed much in appearance since their first meeting. Still the same regal figure, still the same proud demeanor. But there was a weariness in her eyes now, a sign that the weight of the war was beginning to take its toll. Darius stepped forward, his voice soft but firm. "Lysera, we need to talk." She didn't look at him at first, but after a long pause, she turned her head, her icy blue eyes meeting his. There was no anger in them now, only a sense of resignation. "What is it, human?" He hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "You've helped us more than I thought you would. But I need to know, where do you stand in all of this? You've given us valuable information, but I don't trust easily. I can't afford to." Lysera sighed, standing up from her chair and walking over to the bars of her cell. She looked him over, her gaze unwavering. "I stand where I've always stood, with my people, but things have changed. The Korthian Empire is no longer what it once was. My father and his people believe in AI supremacy, in the idea that the Korthians are destined to rule the galaxy. But I've seen what it's doing to them. The AI has begun to corrupt everything it touches. The Korthians aren't just fighting for control. They're fighting for their very survival." Darius listened intently, absorbing every word. "So you're saying the Empire is falling apart?" "Not yet," she replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. "But it will. And when it does, I will be left to pick up the pieces, but I will not let them drag me down with them. I see now that my people's way of life is broken. That's why I'm helping you. I can't stand by and watch as they destroy everything." Darius felt a flicker of something, an emotion he couldn't quite place. Was it hope? Or maybe it was just the realization that this war was about more than just defeating an enemy. It was about the future of the galaxy, about the choices people made and the lines they crossed. Lysera had made a choice, and it was one that put her at odds with everything she had been taught. "I don't know if I can trust you completely, Lysera," Darius said, his voice low. "But I know this. We're fighting for the same thing now. And that's something I can't ignore." She nodded slowly, her gaze softening for the first time since he had met her. "I know. And I won't forget what you've done for me. I may never be able to fully trust humans, but I understand now that not all of you are my enemies. You've shown me that. And for that, I'm willing to help." The conversation between them was a turning point. Darius had no illusions about the dangers of trusting Lysera. She was still a member of the royal family, still tied to the Korthian Empire, but there was something different about her now. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a person, someone who had seen the flaws in her own people's system, and that made her a valuable ally. As Darius left her cell, he couldn't help but feel that this war was about more than just survival. It was about understanding, about forging connections with those who were once enemies. The galaxy was full of darkness, full of people who had lost their way. But if they could find common ground, if they could learn to trust each other, maybe there was hope after all. Lysera had become more than just an enemy. She had become a symbol of what was possible when old alliances were broken and new ones were forged in the darkest of times. And Darius knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As unlikely allies in the dark, they would have to fight for a future that none of them could have imagined before. The war had taken its toll on everyone. The human fleet, though battered and weary, had managed to hold its ground against the Korthians, thanks in part to the valuable intelligence provided by Lysera. But despite the successes, there was a nagging sense of unease in the air. Darius couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something hidden just beneath the surface. He had trusted Lysera, but trust was a fragile thing, especially in a war like this. Darius had grown accustomed to working with the intelligence Lysera had given them, and the human fleet had used it to carry out several successful strikes against the Korthian forces. They had managed to disable a few more AI-controlled ships, giving them a slight upper hand. However, the victory felt hollow, as if the real fight was yet to come. The Korthians were regrouping, and Darius could feel it. There was something larger on the horizon, something that threatened to change everything. One evening, as Darius stood on the bridge of Valor's Wrath, overseeing the fleet's preparations, a sudden alarm blared across the ship. His heart skipped a beat. The last thing they needed right now was another attack. He quickly moved toward the communications officer, who was already frantically analyzing the data. "Captain, we've detected an incoming signal from the Korthian fleet," the officer reported, her voice filled with urgency. "It's unlike anything we've seen before. Their fleet is assembling in a formation we've never encountered. Darius frowned. The Corthians were known for their strategic brilliance, but this was different. Something was off. He felt a chill run down his spine. As he turned to look at the tactical display, his eyes widened. The Corthians were preparing for something bigger than any of their previous attacks. The information they had relied on from Lysara had been accurate in the past, but this felt like a trap. "Get me Lysara," Darius ordered, his voice firm. If anyone could shed light on what the Corthians were planning, it was her. He didn't trust her completely, but he had no choice now. Her knowledge could be the key to understanding what was about to happen. Minutes later, Lysara was brought to the bridge, her face as calm and composed as ever, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. She walked toward Darius, her movements graceful but measured. It was clear that she knew something was wrong, but whether she was hiding it or not was another question entirely. "Captain," she said quietly, "I assume you've seen the formation. It's a new strategy, one that the Corthians have been planning for a long time." Darius studied her closely. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, but there was something else there too, something he couldn't quite place. "What is it, Lysara? What aren't you telling me?" Her expression hardened, and for the first time since their uneasy alliance began, Darius saw the true weight of her loyalty to her people. She took a deep breath before speaking. "It's a decoy," she said, "a trap designed to lure you into a false sense of security. The Corthians are planning an ambush, but the real danger isn't their fleet. It's what they have hidden behind the trap." Darius's heart raced as the realization hit him. The Corthians had been using Lysara to feed them false information all along. He had trusted her, and in return, she had betrayed him, leading them into a deadly trap. "You've been feeding us lies," he demanded, his voice rising with anger. "All this time, we've been fighting with the wrong intelligence, and you—" Lysara's eyes flashed with a mix of regret and defiance. "I didn't betray you, Captain. I did what I had to do to survive. The Corthian Empire is crumbling, and I was trying to protect myself. You think I wanted to see Earth destroyed? You think I wanted this war?" Darius clenched his fists, fighting the anger that threatened to take over. "You should have told me the truth from the beginning. You used us, Lysara. You used my people." "I never wanted to," she said softly, "but I was trapped, just like you. The Corthians are ruthless. If I had told you everything, they would have killed me, or worse. I had no choice." Darius stood in silence for a long moment, trying to process everything that had just been revealed. He had thought Lysara was an ally, but now he wasn't sure what to believe. Had everything she told him been a lie? Had she manipulated him from the start? Or had she truly been trying to help, caught between her loyalty to her people and her growing understanding of the truth? The silence between them was thick, but Darius knew they didn't have time to argue. The Corthians were moving fast, and if they didn't act soon, the trap would be sprung, and the human fleet would be caught in a nightmare from which there would be no escape. "Tell me everything," Darius said, his voice steady, though his mind was reeling. "What's the real plan?" Lysara hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice low and reluctant. "Behind the decoy fleet, there's a superweapon, a Corthian prototype designed to destroy entire planets. It's been hidden from the public, even from most of the Corthian military. Only the highest-ranking officials know about it." Darius's blood ran cold. A weapon capable of destroying planets. The implications were terrifying. Earth was already on the brink of collapse, and now they faced an enemy with a weapon that could wipe out entire worlds. The stakes had just escalated to a level he couldn't even fathom. "We can't fight that," Darius muttered, pacing the bridge. "What do we do? How do we stop it?" Lysara looked at him, her expression grim. "We don't have much time. But if we can disable their AI systems, we might be able to stop the weapon before it's too late. I can help you, Captain, but you'll need to trust me." The shuttle shook violently as it made its way deeper into the heart of the Corthian fleet. Darius and his team had become accustomed to the chaos of battle, but this was different. The air was thick with tension, and every second felt like an eternity. As they neared their target, Darius's mind raced with the weight of their mission. Enemy ships closing in, one of the crew members warned. We're almost at the AI core. Prepare for boarding. Darius didn't respond. He couldn't afford to. All he could think about was getting to the AI core and shutting down the superweapon. The shuttle dipped and swerved, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. They were close now, too close for comfort. With a sudden jolt, the shuttle shuddered as it made contact with the Corthian flagship. The team quickly disembarked, weapons drawn, and moved in formation toward the heart of the ship. The corridors were eerily silent, but Darius knew better than to relax. The Corthians were notorious for setting traps, and they would do everything in their power to stop them. They moved swiftly, cutting down any Corthian soldiers who got in their way. Darius's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the AI core. It was hidden deep within the ship, protected by layers of security and advanced technology. But with Lysara's help, they knew exactly where to go. The door to the AI core opened with a hiss, revealing the vast chamber inside. At the center stood a massive glowing interface, a network of cables and screens that controlled the entire Corthian fleet. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the power of Corthian technology. But it was also their greatest weakness. Darius stepped forward, pulling out the device Lysara had given him. It was a small but powerful hacking tool, capable of bypassing the Corthian security systems and gaining access to the central AI. He inserted the device into the main terminal, his hand steady despite the chaos outside the chamber. The countdown to the super weapon's activation was still ticking away, and he knew they didn't have much time. Almost there, Darius muttered to himself, sweat trickling down his face. He could feel the pressure mounting as the device interfaced with the Corthian AI systems. The screens flickered, and the lights in the chamber dimmed for a moment. "Captain, the Corthians are closing in," one of the crew members yelled. "We're going to be surrounded." Darius didn't take his eyes off the terminal. "Hold them off. I'm almost done." Seconds felt like hours as the AI systems fought back, trying to shut him out. Darius gritted his teeth, pushing through the resistance. He could hear the sounds of battle outside, but all he could focus on was the screen in front of him. The fate of Earth depended on what happened in the next few moments. Finally, with a loud beep, the device flashed green. Darius let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The AI had been hacked. The Corthian superweapon, once poised to destroy Earth, was now powerless. The countdown had stopped. "Do it," Darius said, turning to the rest of the crew. "Get us out of here." The team quickly regrouped, and they made their way back to the shuttle. The Corthians were in disarray, realizing too late that their superweapon had been disabled. The human fleet, now with the advantage, pushed forward with renewed strength, their weapons aimed at the remaining Corthian ships. As the shuttle blasted off from the flagship, Darius watched the massive Corthian vessel explode in the distance. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. Earth had been saved. The war had ended, but the cost had been high. The human fleet had lost many good men and women, including Bonner, who had sacrificed his life to ensure their victory. Darius couldn't forget the faces of those who had fallen, and he knew that the scars of the war would remain long after the fighting stopped. But for now, they had won. Humanity had survived, and the Corthians had been defeated. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but Darius knew one thing for sure: Earth would stand strong, no matter what came next. As the crew celebrated their hard-earned victory, Darius stood alone on the bridge, staring out into the vastness of space. The battle was over, but the journey was far from finished. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity had earned its place in the galaxy.